Hi, everybody. This is Steve, Monday Chief Forecaster with Rowan County Weather, and I am delighted to be joined today by legendary NASCAR radio broadcast announcer Doug Rice. Doug, I certainly appreciate your time and joining us here today.
Steve, it's my pleasure. And before we get started, thanks for the great service you do with Rowan County Weather on the platform formerly known as Twitter. Being a citizen of Rowan County, it's nice to have a reliable local forecast. So thanks for the great work you do there.
Well, certainly, I certainly appreciate that, and I thank you so much for that. Let's go ahead and kind of start with that. So, I did want to kind of mention to some folks that may not know you actually do live in Rowan County. Obviously, it's right around the center of the racing world, really, in terms of NASCAR, with Concord and Charlotte being the main areas there. But tell us about just your thoughts on Rowan County in general. Obviously, you like it because you live here, but how do you feel overall with
Lived there
everything you've
most of
seen?
my adult life. Moved there when I was
Yeah,
11 and have chosen to stay in Rowan County, which is adjacent to Cabarrus County, where I work at full time at Performance Racing Network at Charlotte Motor Speedway. A lot of race fan interest there. Great place to live because you're close enough to Charlotte that if you want to go and catch NFL or NBA action, you can. And you feel far enough out that you're removed from some of the traffic woes and things that go on in large metropolitan areas. So it's a nice town to live in. Like every town, it's got its plus and minuses, but Rowan County's a pretty special place. Went to high school there and then went on to Appalachian State after I left there.
sir. And I certainly want to talk to you about your time at Appalachian State here shortly, but let's go ahead and kind of go back and recap this past NASCAR season and really just kind of break it down into a couple of things. What really stood out to you the most in terms of your favorite moment of this past season with NASCAR?
Wow, my favorite moment of this
Yeah.
past season. That's always tough. I think maybe now in retrospect, Ryan Blaney's first win at the Coca-Cola 600. He came on late in that race, dominated the last stage. That's the only race that has four stages. And Blaney had been in the running all night, and then just out of nowhere, here he comes and he wins the race. And I remember that thinking, wow, they showed a lot of muscle. And then they kind of went back in their shell and didn't do anything until we got to the playoffs. I figured Blaney was going to be one of the first eliminated. And the next thing you know, he's the NASCAR champion. So I think maybe Blaney winning the Coca-Cola 600 and then Shane Van Gisbergen winning the race on the street course at Chicago. That's pretty good stuff. Here's a guy making his first NASCAR Cup Series start, one of the most anticipated races in the history of NASCAR, and we got a guy that most people can't even pronounce his name winning it. So that's a big moment too.
Yeah, that was absolutely an awesome race to watch. I certainly enjoyed it. I'm glad NASCAR is going to give that another go. I think that anytime we can see evolution in the sport, it's a good thing. Um, what would you say would be the moment of the season that you were kind of disappointed in? It can obviously be from anything from performance or whatever. I know a lot of folks kind of focus on the short track package, and they didn't like that. But what would you say would be
Well,
your moment?
NASCAR's still got to work on that, and they've got to work
Yeah.
on getting the road courses more competitive. I did two races this year. We did the IndyCar race and nothing happened. Michael McDowell won, good on him, but there was just no tension at all on the road course races this year. At Sonoma, the race took less than 3 hours to run because there weren't any cautions. And I'm not saying that wrecks make races better, but restarts make races better. And the road course package still needs to be worked on. The short track package needs to be worked on. But I'm not saying anything new. NASCAR knows that. They're going to do some pretty extensive tests in the offseason and hopefully can come up with a solution. It's weird, though. It's like the bubble under the carpet. When you step on it in one place, it magically pops up somewhere else. For years, NASCAR was criticized for the mile-and-a-half racetracks and the mile ovals. Oh, the cookie cutters, they're awful. I hate them. Get rid of them. Well, with this new package, they're great. We race at Kansas, Charlotte on the oval, Darlington, wherever, and the shows are fantastic. But you've sacrificed the short track and the road course. It's not easy. There is no one size fits all in this.
Definitely. So this past season, we saw the resurgence of really, and I'm kind of warmed by, my heart is warmed by this, but we saw the resurgence of what I feel is one of NASCAR's greatest tracks. Now, there's some work that's got to be done with it, but North Wilkesboro Speedway came back. And how do you feel about that?
Loved it. Was able to go up there and work the public address system for that race, and was there for just about everything that went on that race week. And I've told a lot of people this: the atmosphere was more like Woodstock or a music festival. It felt more like Merle Fest, which is just up the road, than it did a NASCAR race. People were just happy that the place was back. It looked great. All the action leading up to the actual All-Star race was really good. Kyle Larson stunk up the All-Star race. Here again, going back to the short track package not being good, but what a great story for Speedway Motorsports, for legacy NASCAR fans. Dale Jr. was a big help there. Jeff Hammond helped a lot. There were a lot of people that had their fingers on the resurgence of bringing that back, and it's just a great story that helped relive some of NASCAR's past, and I think will be a big part of NASCAR's future for a long time.
Sir. So as we look ahead toward next season, which ironically enough, I saw a post on X from Larry McReynolds earlier today, 96 days now until Daytona. And it's hard to believe you just wrapping up one season and we're already starting to look toward the next one, but that's what you have to do, obviously, in this sport. It's not year round in terms of competition, but it certainly is year round in terms of staying prepared. Uh, what are you looking for in the next season coming up? What do you think is going to be the big story for us if you had to pick one right away?
I think one of the big stories will be, can Chase Elliott bounce back? Can we see him come back from missing 7 races and not being a playoff driver to winning some races and being a playoff driver? He's NASCAR's most popular driver, although I think in the future Ryan Blaney may give him a run for that title. Blaney's got a lot of fan support. But can he bounce back? Can he come back from what was just a disaster of 2023 and make himself known in the sport? That's one thing that I'm really going to be watching. And I'll be curious to see if Kyle Busch, who slumped in the second half of the season, can be resurgent again at RCR.
So just on Chase Elliott quickly, I know a lot of folks made a big deal about the snowboarding incident and all that, and it really taking him out. It obviously impacted his season. There's no question about that. But even when he came back, he certainly had every opportunity really to still maybe bounce back. I know he missed a lot of time with the team and all that. But what are your thoughts with drivers doing extracurricular activities and getting, kind of breaking up the monotony, if you will?
I'm going to speak out of both sides of my mouth here. I don't think you can tell them stay in the basement, don't go outside. That's not realistic. But use common sense. Chase has snowboarded all his life. From what I hear, he's a world-class skier and snowboarder. So I don't know that was a big deal. I don't know that I want my driver that I've invested millions of dollars in outrunning a dirt sprint car on Tuesday night. Alex Bowman tore up his back, and he never was the same. He never was the same after he came back. I'm more in favor of, hey, guys, be reasonable with what you want to do in your off time. A lot of people are dependent on you being successful. When Chase Elliott missed those 6 races, it didn't just hurt Chase Elliott. It hurt everybody that works at Hendrick Motorsports, that works on that 9 team, for the sponsors that put that money in it. Use common sense in what you're going to do with your off time.
Yeah, and I heard Kevin Harvick in an interview the other day, totally unrelated to Chase Elliott or anything like that, but he was just speaking about just coming, just really beginning his retirement. And one of the things he mentioned is he was planning on phasing into that part of life was looking at his current team that he had and his company and going, okay, I've got these mouths that depend on me to have food on their table, and planning it out. And certainly it seems like, that's really your thought, even if you tie the Chase Elliott situation or Alex Bowman into it as well. And I certainly agree with it, but I thought it was kind of refreshing, really, when you think back to 20 years ago, you may not have heard Kevin Harvick say that. So certainly you can see that it comes with age with a lot of these guys, that they do develop that maturity of, hey, I've got more than just me that's at stake here.
Well, you use the word maturity, and that just naturally happens as you get older. You realize don't surround yourself with yourself. You surround yourself with others, and that's the thinking that needs to drive you. And I think maturity is a big part of that. I say all of that, Steve, but I also am very excited about the possibility that Kyle Larson's going to Indy to run the 500. But I will put that above the Tuesday night feature race at Cherokee Speedway. I think there's exceptions to every rule for that. I make that exception, but I want my drivers to use best judgment. We need you healthy.
Totally agree. So, a lot of times with these interviews, I like to get some insight for the young folks that are coming along. And I know you've had a fantastic broadcasting career, and I can't thank you enough personally for all the years I've gotten to listen to you on the radio. And to be quite honest with you, no offense to the folks on television, but I get more excitement from the play-by-play on the radio, if you will, than I do from TV. And I know it's a different kind of world because you're painting a mental picture for me to visualize in my own mind, while the folks on television are kind of reliving what's happening in real time. But what got you in love with racing and maybe wanting to get into broadcasting with either NASCAR or just racing in general?
Well, my love was radio, and racing became my conduit to be on the radio. As long as I can remember, at any age, I was fascinated by the voices on the radio, whether they were DJs in faraway stations or local play-by-play guys. I just loved that. I thought that's a glamorous thing. Wow, how cool is it to be talking on the radio and people are listening to you? When I was very young, I stayed up and listened to the Atlanta Braves with Milo Hamilton and Ernie Johnson doing the Braves games. And when they would go to the West Coast to play the Padres or the Dodgers or the Giants, I would stay up till 1 a.m. listening to those guys on the radio, flipping my baseball cards on the bed as they announced the lineups, and just thought that's the neatest job. And I wanted to be a part of radio. I got to work at WSTP RDX in Salisbury on the teen Saturday morning radio show, and I represented West Rowan High School and did some of that. And then once somebody tells you, hey, I heard you on the radio, man, there's a switch that flips there. So it was radio that got me to racing, not racing that got me to radio. I went to Appalachian State, majored in broadcasting, worked at the campus radio station for all 4 years there. Absolutely loved that. Thought I was going to be the next Casey Kasem, but the DJ world kind of shrank really quick. And I liked sports. I dabbled in it. I worked in it at WSTP in Salisbury. I did the high school football game of the week for 10 years, where you followed usually the best team in the county. Once you got past halfway, you knew that North Rowan or South Rowan was going to be good. So you followed them. I did Catawba College, 2A school basically, or a Division II school in college, and I did them for 11 years, and I loved play-by-play. But at that time, if you lived in North Carolina and you wanted to do big league play-by-play, there were no Carolina Panthers, there were no Charlotte Hornets. It was a wasteland unless you went to big-time college football, and all of those jobs are nobody leaves those. People get to be the play-by-play guy for the Tar Heels or the Wolfpack, and they stay there. They never leave until they just age out. And so I realized, well, NASCAR is a little more wide open. It's not quite as closed shop. And I started dabbling in covering NASCAR for United Press International or Associated Press or the North Carolina News Network. Whoever would pay me a little bit to go and cover the race, that's how I got there.
So you mentioned Appalachian State, and obviously, a couple of Rowan County residents are alumni there. Certainly, you are David Wisnett, who is a great guy that I know you're familiar with as well from just living here, and of course Appalachian State. One thing I like about Appalachian State that they do at their radio station every year is they get you guys to come back and go on air for a little bit of time. Do you enjoy that? I mean, I know you certainly enjoy it, but how does that make you feel to go back and be able to do that?
It's cool. I mean, they give us a lot of grief about being old geezers and that sort of thing that come back to play rock music. But, yeah, it's nice because I will pay my little bit of money and I'll do a 1 hour radio show at WASU, I will put more research into that 1 hour than I ever did a month's air research when I was in college. I just went on and played the next Peter Frampton song. And one of the things that was beautiful when I was in school, you had confinements, but you picked your own songs. So that was really special. So to be able to go back and play an Allman Brothers song and explain what it meant to me when I was in college, or what it meant to the university, and how, I got to see Greg Allman in concert there. That's all pretty good. So yeah, that's a nice thing that they do. App State has a great broadcasting program. I'd say it's almost second to none for TV and radio, and I've continued to work with that group during this time.
So, what would be your advice for any youngsters watching this right now that may be in high school, or maybe transitioning between high school and college, and they're thinking about going into broadcasting? What would be your advice to those folks watching right now?
Well, the field's wide open, and even though there are less local radio stations, a lot less than there used to be, there's so many other conduits, just like the show that you're doing right now. Podcasting has just exploded, and that's broadcasting. You may not have a signal like a TV or a radio station, but you do. You have the internet, which is accessible by everybody on the planet. So be creative, figure out a way to expose yourself, whether it's through a podcast. A lot of people now are doing some really creative things on YouTube. There's 4 or 5 content creators in the NASCAR world that are just crushing it. A guy named Eric Estep does a really good show, and several others they're doing it all by themselves. Nobody had to hire them. They've generated enough following now that they're making money off of it. So there are ways to do this without actually being hired. So that's one of the openings. And then if you want to be an announcer, and especially sportscasting, you do anything in your world that allows you to get behind a microphone, whether that's announcing the lineup at the Little League game, going and doing the junior high PA for a basketball game, or whatever. Anything that allows you to put that microphone in front of your mouth and start talking. Do that. There's no little jobs on that. And do that as best you can, whether it is Little League, whether it's high school, junior high, small college. Do it at the absolute best level you can. And I'll say something about the guy that's producing this show today, David Stiles. David has been doing play-by-play now for about 2.5 years of Mooresville Blue Devil football on WHIP radio in Mooresville. And his growth has exceeded. He's good enough now that he could do a higher level of that because he's devoted a lot of energy and time into his craft. But that's what you got to do. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to do the Little League and just kind of half-ass it. You got to do it the way it's supposed to be done and devote time and energy to it. And if you do that, people will notice and you'll grow.
One of the things I appreciate about you, Doug, is with everything you just mentioned, obviously that's something that someone getting into the field could certainly look to do. But you've been there for a while now yourself, and you still do these things. Like I know, you said Mooresville, and it triggered me that I think, if I remember correctly, you actually do play-by-play at Mooresville High School. Not on the radio, but just there at the game.
No,
right?
I don't do the PA. I did PA at Appalachian for a couple of years.
Appalachian.
I have filled in for David Stiles on the Mooresville games, a couple of games the last 3 or 4 years I've been able to do, which is fun. It's nice to go back and realize, man, to do this right, you got to do work. And that's the thing that I would impress on any young people. My first racing job calling play-by-play was at an 8th Mile dirt track in Lexington, or Tyro, North Carolina. And it was pretty much all the R.J. Reynolds executives' kids, because they had a lot of money out racing go-karts every Saturday night. And I did that for $25 and a 6-pack of beer. But I worked on it. Each time I tried to learn something else about these kids that were racing, learn how to identify them. And if you can call 20 go-karts on an 8th Mile track in a cloud of dust, calling these big stock cars out on the racetrack is not that hard. They're big. The numbers are large.
Definitely. Speaking of calling the races, so obviously I see the PRN logo back there behind you, the Performance Racing Network, and you guys, you've got a great crew. I've got the ability to at least know a lot of them through what's now X, formerly Twitter. And first of all, we can start with Laura, who's your producer there. She obviously had a viral moment during the NASCAR season, posting that video of you guys calling the race and her being like the air traffic controller, if you will, during the pit stops. And that was really neat. But just take a moment, if you would. I know you love to do this, and I love to hear it. If you would just recognize the folks that work with you
Well,
there, especially the behind the scenes
I
folks.
do want to touch on Laura Beth Barnhart, the person you just
Yeah.
mentioned. She is our director. Laura lives in Salisbury,
Mhm.
and worked at WSTP RDX. Helped do American Legion baseball. Did some sports reports. We had an opening in our director's job that opened up after a person left after a long tenure here, and she was the logical fit. She is a great organizer. Uh, she's detail oriented, and here again, she puts in the work. She shows up. She's prepared. There's a run of show. She is a organizer for her job at Lowe's, where she runs a huge department there. So it's the right person in the right job. And she did have a viral moment where she was calling out, barking out the directions for live pit stops, and we had a GoPro on her, and it went nuts because it shows that's not an easy job if it's done right. And we have some great behind the scenes people. I mentioned David Stiles, who's engineering the show today. Harold Hamrick, who's the only lead engineer we've ever had here. Harold's a problem solver. He is brilliant in his own right, in the sense that he can see things and diagnose it and put together a great broadcasting system for us. He also runs the board for all the races, and he's backed up by a guy that works and manages Learfield Sports in Winston-Salem, and Ben Blevins. So we've got really a deep group of people, and they've got other people, Tracy Rice and Bill Parrott and Scott Hollingsworth and other folks that help out on the engineering side. So those are the behind the scenes people. The front of the house people, myself and Mark Garrow are in the booth. Rob Albright and Pat Patterson do the turns. Sometimes we bring in our buddies from the IndyCar Radio Network, Mark Janes and Nick Yeoman, who are two of the absolute best broadcasters I have ever worked with. I say that unabashedly. They both can call circles around me. They're just that talented. Pit Road, Wendy Venturini, Brett McMillan, Brad Gilley are down there a lot. Doug Turnbull, who does Doug Turnbull works for WSB Radio in Atlanta and does traffic. So our thinking is, if Doug Turnbull can describe Atlanta traffic in 30 seconds or less, calling a NASCAR race has got to be the easiest job in the world. And I probably have missed some people, and I'm sorry about that, but I will put our line up against anybody. I like what the other guys do. The Motor Racing Network has pros that have been at this as long as we have. We do things differently, but we also complement each other. We're not in competition with MRN. They do their races and we do ours. We both try to do them as best as possible.
What's another thing you mentioned? I love the fact that obviously, listening to the races on Sirius XM satellite radio, you guys do complement each other. I can remember numerous times, not only this past season, but over the past few seasons, to where you may be wrapping up your race broadcast and you'll say, now next week, our friends at the Motor Racing Network are going to be back with you. Or they may do the same. Next week, our friends at the Performance Racing Network are going to be back with you. And it's certainly very refreshing to see, because you all have one main goal in mind: to give NASCAR fans great product, great on-air product, and give them accurate, right down to the second, play-by-play / pit road calls, everything. And it is certainly refreshing to see. I'm going to tell on myself real quick, though. So a lot of folks don't know this here, but when I was growing up, I actually in the 90s was on radio myself. I did sports radio for 1440 WLXN in Lexington. And my first venture into NASCAR was actually working with a guy you know very well, Danny Chocolate Myers, and his wife Kieran. We had a
Yep.
radio show called Chalk Talks. They used to be on back in the 90s. And I certainly really enjoyed that, especially in 1998 when Dale Earnhardt Sr. won the Daytona 500. And Chocolate was back that next day and was still just riding that high. But I certainly, enjoyed that as well. Doug, before we wrap up, though, I did want to hit you with just a couple of just general questions. First and foremost, folks may or may not know this, that you guys, your offices are right there at the Charlotte Motor Speedway, which I find to be really cool and really neat. a lot of great things coming up at the Charlotte Motor Speedway this holiday season for folks that live in the area. You know, the Christmas lights are coming up, the Speedway lights, and I know that's a big deal down there. Do you guys? I know that kind of has an impact on your day to day down there when things like that happen.
Well,
But how do you
you
enjoy
want to
having
be
these
out of
extra
here
events?
before dark when
Yeah.
Speedway Christmas is in effect because the cars start lining up and the people start streaming in. It's one of those things that started. I don't think we were first to do it. We were one of the earliest places to use all this space to put up Christmas lights. First couple of years
Mm-hmm.
they did it. It wasn't that great, but just like everything else, they've added on and added on. And now, if you want to come to the Speedway Christmas Lights show, you come in, you tune to the little FM transmitter they have here, and the whole thing, all of the acreage here is choreographed to music. So wherever you are, the lights respond to the Mannheim Steamroller song that you're listening to or whatever, and it's really cool. It's been neat to be a part of Charlotte Motor Speedway. My brothers and I used to come down here as a big family group. Sometimes we stayed in the infield, sometimes we sat in the grandstands, and that was my legacy with racing when I first started being a fan. I wasn't always a race fan. My brothers kind of brought me into it, but it's a cool place that's brought a lot of joy to millions of people over the years. And the Speedway Christmas is cool. The two big races we have, the auto fairs, the dirt track, the drag strip. I mean, it's its own city. Speedway Boulevard ends here, and there's a reason they built it because of all the traffic coming to here.
Definitely. So I asked you earlier about your favorite moment from last season, but what would be your favorite moment overall? And it doesn't even have to be NASCAR; it can be just anything in life. Favorite moment you can remember, just
Wow,
in general.
my favorite sports moment, and you can probably guess this, has nothing to do with NASCAR. It's when Appalachian State beat Michigan and blocked field goal that Michigan would have won the game on had they hit it after App pretty much dominated them the whole game. Nothing will ever top that. Even if the Falcons miraculously win a Super Bowl or the Braves win 5 more World Series, nothing's going to beat that because little Appalachian State wasn't supposed to win that day. We were supposed to go. The game had no odds, meaning Vegas thought, okay, Michigan will win by 50 or more. We're not going to give you a number to bet on. And so they set no odds on it, and App went up there and upset the number 5 team in the nation. And that's the single best sports moment I've ever had. I got to call Tony Stewart's first win at the Brickyard for the IMS radio network, and that's back when the place had 200,000 people there, and you could hear them buzzing with 4 laps to go, thinking that their guy was going to win the race. And that was a lot of fun. I just kept thinking, I knew it. I got to call the end of the race and said, don't mess this up. Make sure that you say something pertinent and get it right. I didn't rehearse it, but I wanted to make sure I got that call right. So on the racing side, that was a big moment. I thought I was going to have a big moment here in 2011 and called Dale Earnhardt Jr. winning the 600, and he ran out of gas 500 feet from the start-finish line. Kevin Harvick won. But I've had a chance to call some great moments in NASCAR, but my favorite sports moment will always be, and it's kind of sad that, that's already sealed, will be App State upsetting Michigan that year.
Yeah. No, I certainly agree with that moment because the one thing I can relate to from especially covering Charlotte FC and some other sports over the past few years is as well as I do, had Michigan hit that field goal, nobody would remember any of the rest of that game.
No, it would have just faded into memory as, this little school gave them a run for their money, but like so many other times. And App's had other chances since then. They should have beaten Tennessee and Penn State since then. They did beat Texas A&M. And, when you cover the soccer team, it's all about capitalizing on that moment and making it stick. And they were able to do that day. And, that's what was thrilling about Shane Van Gisbergen winning at Chicago. He's not supposed to win that race. He'd never been in a cup car in his life. And he goes up there and schools these guys. That's all they've ever done. And those are great moments. If he finishes second, it's not a great story, but he won. Winning is what makes great stories.
Absolutely. So flip side of that, what would be the most adverse moment you faced?
I've had a lot of challenges doing broadcast over the years, not so much with PRN, but back when I was doing high school and college, just getting on the air. We went to do a Livingstone College game at St. Paul's up in Virginia. And we got there, and there was no phone hookup. We'd ordered it. Phone company did not put it in. The guy came out there and looked at it. He said, "There's nothing I can do." He said, "There's no phone lines that run to this little field." And literally, when we got there, the field was covered with people having the homecoming celebration. Then it got on the PA and said, "Okay, everybody, move your cars. We got to play football." And I thought, okay, this is different. So we never got on the air. And we had to go, the closest phone, this is a true story, was at a funeral home about a mile down the road. So the people were nice enough to let us use their phone in the lobby of the funeral home. And so for the first 2 quarters, we went in and did an update. Oh, after 1 quarter of play, here's the score: Livingston 12, St. Paul 7, or whatever. So I did this. I did a couple of the quarters, and my good buddy, the late Howard Platt, went in to call in one. And then Howard came back, and I could tell he was kind of sheepish. I said, "Did you get it in?" He goes, "No." And I said, "Why not?" He goes, "Well, they've got a funeral going on now." So we never got to report on the final of that game until like 3 hours after it was over, and we found a payphone somewhere in rural Virginia. So there's always things that you have to overcome, And like everybody else, you have personal tragedies and triumphs, and trying to keep those into the sports world right now. But the whole COVID thing was tough. It's tough on sports. We got to go to the racetrack to broadcast those races, and that was better than most broadcasters who had to sit in front of a TV monitor and call them. So that was tough. And we did lose one of our longtime team members to COVID, and that was a really hard situation.
So just 2 more questions for you real quick, Doug. One, first of all, I know you're a big music guy. One of the things I love about seeing on social media is when someone asks a question about a certain song or what's the best song in this genre or whatever, you've always got an answer. And I know you've had a love for music. What would be your all-time favorite song ever?
Wow, my
Hands
all-time
down.
favorite song ever.
Yeah.
I think that goes by genres.
Mhm.
I love the Allman Brothers Band. I think Statesboro Blues from their Live at the Fillmore album is just a great song musically. The writing is great, and it's just a very, very powerful song. But then the other band that I like is just the absolute opposite of the Allman Brothers, and that's Steely Dan, where the Allman Brothers are all about the jam and the extended play and all of that. Steely Dan's a very technical, precise band. And when they do something like Babylon Sisters, I just go crazy too. I like all kinds of music. I spent yesterday on a YouTube jog of watching Kenny Chesney videos. I guess maybe I felt like I needed to go to the beach because that's what he's all about.
I hear you there. And then the last question. So the holiday season, we're getting to the thick of it. Thanksgiving coming up next week, and then Christmas not long after that. It'll be here and gone before we know it. But what's your favorite holiday tradition?
I love Thanksgiving. I like the big meal. I like the whole leading up to it. I cook a turkey on a wood pellet grill. My wife fixes all these great sides. We have people over. I like Thanksgiving in some ways better than Christmas because it's not all the tension. You don't have to worry about buying gifts and getting them to people and sizes and everything else. And it's just about communication. It was always big. I'm the 8th out of 8 kids. And for years, Thanksgiving was that one time that I got to see a lot of my brothers and sisters and my nieces and nephews all in the same place. And that conjures up a lot of nice memories. I love Thanksgiving. I love everything about it. I love eating way too much food, swearing I'm never going to eat again. And then by the end of the 1 o'clock football game, I'm back with a second plate. So, yeah, I love Thanksgiving. It's just a great holiday and everything that it stands for.
Definitely. Well, Doug, I certainly appreciate your time today. I know you're very busy, and I appreciate the opportunity to just sit and chat with you. And it's been an absolute pleasure. And I look forward to seeing you out there on social media as I have for the last few years. And thank you for your kind words at the start as well.
All right, Steve. Thank you very much, man. Keep up the great work. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you, sir.